I returned from my son's funeral and stood on the doorstep of my house, but the locks had already been changed. "This is my house now, get out," my daughter-in-law hissed. I just smiled. "Sit down, I'll tell you who the real owner of this house is." She doesn't yet know what the rules of life will be and the price of betrayal. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. The key scraped against metal that shouldn't have been there. Wrong resistance, wrong everything. I pulled it out and looked at it, then at the lock, then back at the key I'd used for 11 years. My brain, still fogged from 3 days of funeral arrangements and 2 hours on the road from Phoenix, took several seconds to understand what my fingers already knew. Someone had changed the locks on my house. I stood there on my own porch in my rumpled black suit, my tie loosened, holding a key that no longer belonged. The February sun pressed against my back. I tried again, slower this time, thinking maybe exhaustion was making me clumsy. The key wouldn't even slide all the way in. Before I could knock, the door swung open from inside. Bernice stood in my doorway wearing clothes I didn't recognize. Tight jeans, a low-cut red blouse that looked brand new. Her expression wasn't grief, wasn't sympathy. It was a smile that started at her lips and never reached her eyes, the kind of smile that makes your stomach drop. "Can I help you?" Her voice dripped with false politeness. "What's going on?" I kept my voice level, pushed down the confusion. "Why doesn't my key work?" "Your key?" She laughed, actually laughed, and leaned against the doorframe like she owned it. "This is my house now. Ralph was my husband, and everything he had belongs to me. You need to leave before I call the cops on you for trespassing." The words hit me like cold water. I'd buried my son that morning, stood over his casket and watched them lower him into Arizona dirt while my knees shook and my chest ached. And now this woman Ralph had been trying to divorce, was standing in my doorway telling me to leave my own property. "You need to stop talking and start listening." My firefighter voice came back, the one I'd used for 30 years when civilians panicked, calm, absolute. "That lock you changed, it's on my door, my house." "Your house?" She pushed off the doorframe, getting louder. "Ralph bought this house. I was his wife for 3 years, and the law says a lot of things." I pulled out my phone, and one of them is that you can't change locks on property that doesn't belong to you. Movement behind her. A man emerged from my living room, someone I'd never seen before, tall, maybe 38, with a thick neck and the kind of swagger that comes from never being told no. He wore a sleeveless shirt that showed off gym muscles, and he was drinking a beer, my beer probably, from my refrigerator. "You heard her, old man." He set the beer down on my entry table without a coaster and crossed his arms. "Get lost before this gets ugly." Nelson? Had to be Nelson, the boyfriend Ralph had mentioned in our last phone call. The reason Bernice had moved out 6 months ago, only to come crawling back when she heard Ralph was sick. "You're making a mistake." I looked past him, saw my furniture rearranged, saw boxes stacked in the corner. They had already started moving in. "Let me explain who actually owns this property." "I own it!" Bernice's voice rose to a shriek. "I was married to your son. That makes it mine. Community property." "You keep saying that." I tapped my phone screen, pulling up my contacts. "But you're wrong on several levels. First nothing." She jabbed a finger at me. "Ralph's gone. You're just his father. You don't get to come here and—" "I'm not just his father." The anger I'd been holding back started to leak through. "I'm the man whose name is on the deed. I bought this house in 2013, never transferred the title. Ralph lived here, but it was always mine." That stopped her for maybe 3 seconds. Then she recovered, face twisting. "Liar! You're lying. Ralph told you what you wanted to hear." I kept my thumb over Celeste's number. "And now you're about to find out what the truth actually is." Nelson stepped forward, filling the doorway completely. His shoulder brushed the frame, deliberate, threatening. "You better back up, old man. Way up." "Or what?" I didn't move. 63 or not, I'd spent 3 decades pulling people out of burning buildings. I'd stared down worse than an overgrown punk drinking my beer. "You going to assault me on my own property, in broad daylight?" "It's not your property." "Then call the police." I raised my phone. "Go ahead, call them. Let's get this settled right now." Bernice's eyes flickered. For the first time, uncertainty crossed her face. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" I pressed the call button, but not to 911, not yet. Because I've got documentation, I've got the deed with my name on it. What do you have? A marriage certificate to a man who was in the process of divorcing you. He never divorced me. No. I heard footsteps behind me on the walkway, right on time. He didn't. But that's not quite the whole story, is it? Bernice's eyes shifted past my shoulder. Her face changed, confidence cracking like ice over deep water. Nelson's posture shifted too, shoulders coming down slightly, confusion replacing aggression. Celeste stepped into view beside me. She stood quietly, no dramatics, just solid presence. 36 years old, wearing a simple black dress, her hair pulled back. She held a folded document in her hand. My voice dropped lower, colder than I'd ever heard it. This is Celeste, Ralph's wife. Bernice's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Her eyes bounced between Celeste and me, like she was watching a tennis match that made no sense. That's impossible. It's not. Celeste's voice stayed soft, but carried weight. She'd been Ralph's first wife, married him young, divorced him 5 years ago after he cheated. But when he got sick, when he realized Bernice had only wanted his money, he'd gone back to the one person who'd actually loved him. We remarried on January 8th. The county clerk's office has the original on file. You're lying! Bernice's voice climbed into a register that probably bothered the neighbors. Ralph would never, not after. That's fake! You forged that document. Celeste unfolded the paper with slow precision, held it up where Bernice could see the official seal, the signatures, the date stamps. I watched Bernice's face cycle through emotions like a slot machine. Disbelief, rage, panic, calculation. Ralph and I remarried 1 month before he died. Celeste kept the certificate just out of Bernice's reach when she lunged forward. This is a certified copy. Check with the county if you don't believe me. Let me see that. Bernice snatched at it. Celeste pulled it back smoothly. No, you don't get to touch this. Nelson stepped fully into the doorframe, his shoulder pressed against the jamb, creating a wall. Whatever paperwork you think you have, doesn't matter. We're already here. Possession is 9/10 of the law, right? That's not actually how property law works. I pulled my phone back out. But let's get some professionals involved. Clear this up officially. I dialed 911, put it on speaker. The dispatcher answered on the second ring. I explained the situation calmly, factually. Returned home from my son's funeral to find the locks changed and strangers inside my house. Gave my address. Said I had documentation proving ownership. Bernice grabbed her own phone, started yelling into it about squatters and forged documents and trespassing. The dispatcher on my line asked us to wait outside, said officers were on the way. Nelson didn't move from the doorway. We're not leaving. His jaw set stubbornly. You want us out, you're going to have to drag us. That's why I called the police. I gestured toward the street. They'll handle it. Will they? Bernice's smile returned, sharper now. Because we're legally inside a residence. We haven't committed any crime. And I've got just as much right to be here as you think you do. The 20 minutes waiting for the police stretched like taffy. We stood in a tableau on the porch, me and Celeste on the outside, Bernice and Nelson blocking the doorway. Neighbors' curtains twitched. A couple walked by with their dog, heads swiveling. When the patrol car finally pulled up, 2 officers emerged. Young guys, probably mid-30s, the kind who'd heard every property dispute story imaginable. I explained first. Showed them my driver's license with this address. Explained I'd been at my son's funeral, came home to change locks. Mentioned the deed was in my name. Bernice jumped in, talking over me, waving her marriage certificate to Ralph like a flag. Said community property, said widow's rights, said she'd already consulted a lawyer. The taller officer held up his hand, cutting through the noise. Sir, ma'am, this is a civil matter. If you claim ownership, you'll need to file an eviction notice through the courts. We can't remove her without a court order. The words landed like a slap. But it's my house. I kept my voice level, but barely. My name is on the deed. I can prove it. That may be true, sir. The officer's tone was sympathetic but firm. But she's claiming legal residence through marriage. That's something a judge needs to sort out. Could take several weeks. Several weeks? Celeste spoke for the first time to the officers. He's supposed to just let them stay there? We understand it's frustrating. The shorter officer glanced at Bernice, who now wore a triumphant smirk. But we can't forcibly remove someone from a residence based on verbal claims. You'll need to go through proper legal channels. Bernice leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. Thank you, officers. I appreciate you explaining the law to these people. Nelson grinned, sipped his beer. The officers left after checking everyone's IDs and writing up a report. Documenting the dispute, they called it, creating a paper trail. I stood on my porch, watching the patrol car pull away. You heard them. Bernice's voice dripped satisfaction. Come back with a court order. Until then, this is my house, my property. You're trespassing. She stepped back inside. Nelson followed. The door closed, and I heard the new deadbolt slide into place with a solid chunk. Celeste touched my arm. Come on, let's go. The drive to the hotel was silent. My hands gripped the steering wheel too tight. My jaw ached from clenching. All I could see was Bernice's smug face, Nelson's arrogant grin, the door closing on my own house. We found a budget motel off the interstate. 2 double beds, thin carpet, television bolted to the wall. I didn't speak until after the door locked behind us and Celeste sat on the edge of the bed, closest to the window. I'm sorry. She stared at her hands. I should have come forward sooner, right after Ralph died. Should have gone to the house and... You didn't know she'd pull this. I sat at the small desk, its surface scarred with old coffee rings. Neither of us did. What now? She looked up, eyes red-rimmed but dry. The lawyer said eviction proceedings could take 2 months, maybe more if she fights it. Eviction is one path. I pulled the notepad from the desk drawer, found a pen in my jacket pocket, started writing. But there are others. What do you mean? I wrote 3 items, underlined them. Utilities, access, pressure. She wants to play games with my son's death? The anger that had been building all afternoon found its shape, turned cold and purposeful. She wants to move her boyfriend into my house and drink my beer while Ralph isn't even cold in the ground? Fine, let's play. Merle, I'm not doing anything illegal. I kept writing, ideas flowing now. But that house is in my name, which means I control certain things she's going to need, things that will make her stay there very, very uncomfortable. Celeste moved to stand behind me, reading over my shoulder. You're going to make her want to leave. I'm going to make her understand what it costs to steal from people. I circled one item twice. She wanted a war, she's got one. And I've got time, documentation, and 30 years of experience dealing with emergencies. I know how systems work, how to navigate them, how to make them work for me. How long will it take? However long it takes. I flipped to a fresh page. Eviction papers would take weeks, but there were other ways to make that house uncomfortable, ways that were completely legal, and I knew every single one of them. A week crawled by. Each morning started the same. Instant coffee from the hotel machine, a stale muffin from the continental breakfast, phone calls. Celeste spent her days at the hospital, double shifts when they'd let her. I spent mine waiting. The hotel bill grew, 6 nights, 7, 8. On the afternoon of the 8th day, everything shifted. I'd been awake since 4:30 that morning, reviewing my notes again, watching dawn break through the thin curtains. The attorney's office opened at 9. I was there at 8:45. David Chen looked younger than his voice on the phone suggested, maybe 40, with steel-rimmed glasses and a precisely knotted tie. His office smelled like coffee and old paper. I slid the property deed across his desk, along with the title, Ralph's death certificate, and the divorce decree from 5 years back. He scanned each document, nodding, typed rapidly on his keyboard, pulling up county records. The house is entirely yours. He tapped his screen. Purchased outright in 2013, no mortgage, title never transferred. She has no claim whatsoever. This is textbook unlawful detainer. How long? We file today, hearing in 2 to 3 weeks, she's out within a month maximum. He pulled up a form template. Arizona law is clear on this. She's an unauthorized occupant. What about my son's assets? The question had been nagging me. Bank accounts, his car. Chen leaned back, folding his hands. Celeste is his legal widow. She inherits everything not jointly owned. The bank account and vehicle go to her automatically once we file the death certificate and marriage certificate with the institutions. Ralph had $12,000 in savings. Not much, but enough to help Celeste with her rent, maybe catch up on some bills. The car was a 10-year-old Camry, reliable enough. How much will this cost me? 5,000 retainer. Should cover everything unless she fights hard. His expression suggested she would. Filing fees run another 320. I wrote the check, watched my savings account drop by a third in one pen stroke. The consultation lasted 90 minutes. Chen was thorough, asked questions I hadn't considered, explained terms like forcible entry and statutory damages. By the time I left, I had copies of everything, a court date pending, and a plan. The courthouse paperwork took another hour. The clerk's office was busy, full of people with their own legal nightmares. I filled out forms, signed affidavits, paid fees. The clerk stamped everything with mechanical efficiency. Hearing set for March 2nd, she informed me, not looking up. You'll be notified by mail. 2 weeks away. 14 more days of hotel bills. 14 more days of Bernice living in my house. I sat in my truck in the courthouse parking lot and made the calls. Phoenix Electric first. I explained I was the account holder and property owner, needed to disconnect service immediately due to unauthorized occupants. The representative asked for verification. Account number, social security number, service address. Everything matched. Service would be terminated within 2 hours. The water company went the same way. 20 minutes on hold, 5 minutes of verification, done. I drove back to the hotel feeling something settle in my chest. Not satisfaction exactly. Purpose, maybe. The firefighter in me recognized the feeling. You've assessed the situation, deployed your resources. Now you wait for results. Celeste returned from her shift at 7. She looked exhausted, her scrubs wrinkled, her eyes red from a double shift in the ER. She kicked off her shoes and collapsed onto the bed. How'd it go? I told her about the attorney, the filing, the timeline. Then I told her about the utilities. She sat up slowly. You cut the power? And the water? I kept my voice level. It's my house, my accounts. Legally I can. She's going to lose her mind. Probably. My phone rang at 5:47. Bernice's name lit up the screen. I let it ring 3 times before answering. What did you do? No greeting, just fury, raw and loud. The power's out. The water won't run. You can't do this? I can. It's my house, my accounts. I sat on the edge of the desk, watching the sunset paint the hotel window orange. Pay the $847 for this month's utilities, and I'll restore service. Don't pay, and you'll learn to live like it's the 1800s. You're insane. This is harassment. I'm calling the police. Call them. Explain you're an unauthorized occupant who won't leave someone else's property, and you're demanding they pay your bills. I kept my tone flat, emotionless. They'd see what they say. Silence on the other end. Not empty silence. I could hear her breathing hard, could practically see her face going red. You're going to regret this. Her voice dropped to something meant to sound threatening. You have no idea what I'm capable of. Then enlighten me. I waited. Or pay the utilities and wait for the court date like an adult. She hung up. I set the phone down carefully, hands steady. Celeste watched me from the bed. Do you think she'll pay? No. I turned to look at her. She'll dig in, fight harder, which is exactly what I expected. Then what? Then we wait. I picked up my notepad, looked at the list I'd been building. And we prepare for her next move. I knew she wouldn't give up that easily. The question was what she'd try next. The days accumulated like debt. 14 nights at the hotel, $89 each. I watched the total climb, felt it like weight in my chest, but didn't stop paying. This was what justice cost. Celeste split her time between her 1-bedroom apartment across town and the hotel room with me. She worked 60-hour weeks, came back smelling like antiseptic and exhaustion. Some nights we didn't even talk, just sat in separate beds watching cable news neither of us cared about. On day 8, Chen called with news I didn't want to hear. She filed a protection order request. His voice was tight with professional irritation. Completely baseless, but we have to respond formally. Court hearing in 5 days. I stood up from the hotel desk, phone pressed to my ear. Protection order? I haven't been near her. Doesn't matter. She claims you threatened her during that phone call about utilities. Says she fears for her safety. Papers rustled on his end. This'll cost another $2,500 in legal fees. We need to compile evidence, prepare testimony, possibly bring Celeste as a witness. She's buying time. The pattern was clear now. Every week she stays in that house is a week she's not paying rent anywhere else. What else can she throw at us? Quite a bit, unfortunately. Chen sighed. She also changed the locks again, second time, and filed a document claiming Ralph made an oral agreement to deed her the house before he died. That's a lie, I know, but we have to refute it officially, document by document, motion by motion. She's using every stalling technique in the book. I sat back down. Did the math in my head. 5,000 retainer, 2,500 more, hotel costs pushing 1,500, court fees. My savings account was hemorrhaging. Do what you need to do. The protection order hearing came 3 days later. I sat in a cramped courtroom while Bernice, wearing her most innocent expression, explained to a judge how I'd intimidated her, threatened her, made her fear for her life. Chen systematically destroyed her testimony. Hotel records showing I'd never left. Celeste's statement. The phone company's log showing a 4-minute call, not the hour-long harassment Bernice claimed. The judge dismissed it in under 20 minutes. But those 20 minutes cost me time, money, and sleep I couldn't get back. Walking out of the courthouse, something shifted in my thinking. Bernice wasn't just stubborn, she was strategic. Every filing, every false claim, every delay was calculated. She'd live in that dark house without electricity or running water, as long as it meant free housing. I needed leverage she couldn't counter. The next morning, I met a private investigator named Marcus Webb in a diner off Indian School Road. He was 50-something, gray beard, eyes that missed nothing. Former Phoenix PD, Chen had said. Knew how to find information that needed finding. I slid an envelope across the table. $1,200 in cash. I need everything on Nelson Hayes. Employment, debts, criminal record, traffic violations. Anything that might be useful. Webb opened the envelope, counted without looking down. This about the house situation Chen mentioned? It's about getting my property back. Fair enough? He pocketed the money. Give me 3 days. 3 days later, he called. I met him in the same diner, same booth. He slid a folder across the table. Nelson Hayes, 38, mechanic, unemployed, currently. Owes 18 grand in back child support to his ex-wife in Tucson. Plus, he's got a bench warrant out of Pima County, failed to appear on traffic violations, fines, total $3,400. I opened the folder, police reports, court documents, everything verified and official. How quickly can you document all of this? I need everything official, everything verified. It already is. Webb tapped the folder. Public records, verifiable, the warrant's active. Pima County would love to know where he is. How long would it take them to pick him up if they knew? If he's in Phoenix, maybe 2 days to coordinate with Phoenix PD. Webb's expression didn't change, assuming someone made an anonymous call with his current location. I studied the documents, $18,000 in child support. A woman in Tucson who wasn't getting money for her kids because this punk was living in my house, drinking my beer. Thank you, Marcus. I was never here. He stood, left cash for his coffee. Good hunting. 2 days after that, I made the anonymous call, provided Nelson's full name, date of birth, and my home address as his current location. Mentioned he was driving a black Dodge Charger, gave them the plate number I'd gotten from Webb's report. That afternoon, I parked my truck 3 houses down, waited. The police cars arrived at 4:15. 2 units, 4 officers, professional, efficient. They knocked, identified themselves. Nelson opened the door wearing a tank top and my son's slippers. I couldn't hear the conversation from my truck, but I could see Nelson's posture change, defensive, aggressive, then resigned when they showed him the warrant, handcuffs, Miranda rights, the walk to the patrol car. Bernice appeared in the doorway, screaming, "This is your doing! You can't just destroy people's lives like this." One officer stayed behind, talking to her, probably explaining that an outstanding warrant wasn't something they could ignore, that this had nothing to do with whatever property dispute she was involved in. Nelson was driven away in the back of a patrol car, head down. Bernice stood alone on the porch, phone in her hand, calling someone, lawyer, probably. Maybe a friend. Her posture shifted, shoulders coming in, less aggressive, more uncertain. Without Nelson, she was alone in that dark house. No electricity, no running water, no backup. The candle she was using for light. The bottled water she had to buy and carry in. The cold food. All of it now, by herself. I wondered how long she'd last now. I started the truck's engine and drove back to the hotel. Nelson's arrest changed everything. Without him, the silence in that dark house must have been deafening. I didn't feel sorry for her. The days crawled toward the hearing date. Bernice made her attempts. Chen forwarded me the legal aid rejection letter 3 days after Nelson was booked. She'd tried the free route first, called Community Legal Services, explained her situation. "Ma'am, we've reviewed your case details." The receptionist's voice on the recorded call Chen obtained was professionally sympathetic but firm. "This is a straightforward property dispute where you have no legal claim. We can't take cases we know we'll lose. I'm sorry." Then came the private attorney responses. Chen had contacts who told him what happened when Bernice called their offices. All the same, money up front, no exceptions. $7,000 retainer for a contested eviction case. She didn't have $700, let alone $7,000. 5 days before the hearing, my phone rang. Her number. I almost didn't answer. Let it ring 4 times before I picked up. "Please." Her voice was different, smaller. The aggression gone, replaced by something that might have been genuine fear. "Just 1 month. I'll pay the utilities, everything you want. I need time to find a place. I have nowhere to go." I stood at the hotel window, watching traffic on the interstate. Thought about Ralph's funeral, the key that wouldn't work, Bernice's smile when she told me to leave. "You had choices." My voice came out colder than I'd intended, but I didn't soften it. "When you threw me out the day of my son's funeral, you made yours. When you changed my locks and moved your boyfriend in, you made yours. Now, I'm making mine." I was grieving. I wasn't thinking straight. Neither was I, but I didn't steal anyone's house. Ralph wanted me to have it. He told me. Ralph divorced you, then he remarried Celeste. Those are facts, not stories. I kept my tone level, clinical. "The hearing is in 5 days. Bring whatever evidence you think you have. The judge will decide." She was crying when I hung up. I set the phone down and didn't think about it again. The 28th arrived. I put on my one good suit again, the black one from Ralph's funeral. Chen met me at the courthouse steps at 8:45, carrying his briefcase like a weapon. "She's representing herself," he informed me as we walked through security. "Pro se, couldn't find an attorney." Will that matter? Not to the outcome, but it might make things messier emotionally. The courtroom was small, wood-paneled, smelling of floor polish and old air conditioning. Judge Martinez presided, a woman in her 50s with reading glasses and no patience for nonsense. Bernice sat alone at the defendant's table. She'd dressed up, probably her best clothes, but they hung wrong on her after weeks without proper washing facilities. Her hair needed attention. She fumbled with papers that weren't organized, weren't even relevant based on what I could see from across the aisle. Chen presented our case in 20 minutes. Property deed in my name since 2013. Title never transferred. Tax records showing my payments. Utility accounts in my name. Ralph's death certificate. Celeste's marriage certificate dated before Ralph's death. Bernice's divorce filing from 5 years ago that was never finalized because she withdrew it. Bernice tried to argue, rambled about oral agreements, about Ralph's promises, about her rights as someone who lived there for 3 years. Judge Martinez cut her off. "Ms. Bernice, do you have any documentation showing ownership or legal right to occupy this property?" Ralph told me documentation, not verbal claims. No, but do you have a lease agreement, a rental contract, any written proof of permission to reside there?" Bernice's mouth opened, closed. Nothing came out. Judge Martinez looked down at the papers in front of her, read for 30 seconds in silence that felt like 30 minutes. "The evidence is clear. The property belongs entirely to Mr. Robertson. Ms. Bernice, you are hereby ordered to vacate the premises within 5 days. Failure to comply will result in sheriff-enforced removal. This court is adjourned." The gavel fell. That sound, sharp, final, absolute. Bernice's shoulders collapsed forward. Her face disappeared into her hands. The sound she made wasn't quite a sob, wasn't quite a scream. Chen touched my elbow. "Let's go." We stood. I gathered my copies of the documents, walked toward the courtroom exit. Bernice's voice followed us into the hallway, rising to a shriek. "You destroyed my life! You took everything from me!" I stopped, turned. She stood in the courtroom doorway, security guard watching her carefully. "No." I kept my voice quiet so she had to strain to hear it. I took back what was always mine. Then I walked out into the bright courthouse hallway, Chen beside me, and didn't look back. 5 days. I knew she wouldn't leave willingly. The sheriff would have to drag her out. Part of me looked forward to watching that happen. 5 days came and went. She didn't pack. She didn't call movers. She didn't leave. Day 1, silence from the house. Day 2, nothing. Day 3, I called the sheriff's office to confirm they'd execute the writ of possession. The deputy I spoke with sounded tired but professional. "We'll be there as soon as we can process the paperwork, sir. Probably the 4th. Day 4, Chen called. "She hasn't contacted us. She's not leaving." Day 5, the deadline. Still no movement. The morning of April 4th, my phone rang at 7. "Mr. Robertson, this is Deputy Michaels with Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. We'll be there at 9:30. Please be present to reclaim your property." I picked up Celeste from her apartment at 8:45. She'd taken the day off, wanted to see this through. We drove in silence, parked across the street from my house at 9:15. The neighborhood looked normal. Morning sun, someone watering their lawn 3 houses down, birds on the power lines. Everything ordinary, except for what was about to happen. 9:30. 2 sheriff's SUVs pulled up, parking directly in front of the house. 4 deputies emerged, 2 men and 2 women, all wearing tactical vests and carrying equipment. Deputy Michaels, the one I'd spoken with, approached my truck. I rolled down the window. "You're Mr. Robertson?" "Yes, sir." "We're going to ask her to exit voluntarily first. If she refuses, we'll make entry and remove her. Stay in your vehicle until we signal it's clear." I nodded. He walked back to his team. They approached the front door. Michaels knocked 3 times, hard enough that I heard it from across the street. "Sheriff's Department, we have a writ of possession. Open the door." Nothing. He knocked again. "Ma'am, we have a court order. You need to open this door right now, or we'll open it ourselves." Through the window, I saw movement, a shadow passing. "I have rights!" Bernice's voice carried through the door, hysterical. "This is my home. You can't do this." Michael stepped back, nodded to one of the male deputies, who retrieved a heavy ram from the SUV. 2 swings. The door frame splintered. 3rd swing, the door crashed inward. They entered. I heard Bernice screaming, wordless and raw. 30 seconds later, they emerged with her between them. She fought, twisting and pulling, but they held her arms firmly and walked her down to the lawn. Not rough, but absolutely unyielding. "You're trespassing on private property." One deputy's voice stayed level. "Don't resist or you'll be arrested for obstruction." They released her on the grass. She collapsed there, knees in the dirt, staring at the house like she couldn't process what was happening. Then the removal began. 2 deputies went in, 2 stayed outside supervising. For 2 hours, they carried everything out. Furniture, boxes, bags of clothes, kitchen items, bathroom supplies, Nelson's weights and tools. Every single item that belonged to Bernice or had been brought into the house over the past month. They piled it on the front lawn. The mountain grew. Couch, mattress, dining chairs, lamps, garbage bags full of who knew what. Neighbors emerged onto their porches, watching. Some tried not to stare. Others didn't bother hiding their interest. At 10:30, the locksmith arrived. I'd called him the previous day, told him to be ready. He parked behind the sheriff's vehicles and walked up with his toolkit. By noon, the pile had reached 6 feet in some places. Bernice sat in the middle of it all, phone pressed to her ear, making call after call. "Please, Sarah, just for a few nights until I figure this out." Her voice carried across the street. "I know it's a lot of stuff, but no, I understand. Thanks anyway." Another call. "Mom, I wouldn't ask if I wasn't desperate. I know we haven't talked in 2 years, but fine, forget I called." Another. Each rejection visible in her posture, her shoulders curling further inward. At 1 o'clock, the deputies emerged for the final time. Michaels approached my truck again. "Property is clear, sir. It's yours." I climbed out. Celeste followed. The locksmith was finishing at the door, installing the 3rd new deadbolt in 5 weeks. He straightened when he saw me, held out 3 keys. "All new hardware. She won't get back in with any old keys or tricks." I took the keys. They were warm from his hand, solid and real. Across the lawn, Bernice stood among her belongings, still on her phone. She saw me, and something broke in her expression. But I didn't feel triumph, I felt tired. "It's over," I said quietly to Celeste. "It's finally over." We walked up the driveway together. The door stood open, deputies having left it that way after their final sweep. Inside, the house looked violated, furniture pushed around, garbage in corners from a month of living without utilities, the smell of spoiled food, unwashed bodies, desperation. But it was mine. My walls, my floors, my home. Through the front window, I watched Bernice loading boxes into a small hatchback, driven by someone I didn't recognize. A friend, maybe. Someone willing to help transport, but not willing to take her in. She made 3 trips, then the car drove away, overstuffed and sagging on its springs. She was gone. But this wasn't finished, not yet. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts, finding the number I needed. Time to move forward with the next phase. The house was mine again. Now I had to see what she'd left behind. I stood in the empty living room, door closed behind me, silence settling like dust. Afternoon sunlight cut through the windows, illuminating particles floating in still air. My footsteps echoed on hardwood that hadn't heard those sounds in 6 weeks. I walked to the thermostat, turned the heat back on. April evenings still got cold. Heard the furnace kick to life in the basement, that familiar rumble. Then I started my inspection. The bathroom mirror was shattered, spiderweb cracks radiating from an impact point. Someone had punched it. The toilet tank lid lay in 3 pieces in the tub. In the kitchen, cabinet doors hung crooked, hinges ripped half out of the wood. Light fixtures in the hallway had been smashed deliberately, glass crunching under my shoes. This wasn't neglect. This was destruction. I pulled out my phone and photographed everything. Each broken fixture, each hole punched in drywall, each gouge in the countertop. 17 photos by the time I finished the downstairs. 23 after I climbed to the 2nd floor and found Ralph's old bedroom stripped bare, closet rods torn from the walls. That weekend, Celeste arrived in her pickup truck loaded with supplies, paint, spackle, replacement fixtures, cleaning supplies that could strip molecular traces of Bernice from every surface. She broke the mirror. Celeste stood in the bathroom doorway, surveying the damage with a clinical eye that came from years of hospital emergency rooms. And the toilet tank lid. This was intentional. Add it to the list. I knelt beside a hole in the drywall, measured it with my phone. I'm documenting everything. If she ever tries anything again, I'll have proof of what kind of person she really is. We worked 3 weekends in a row. Patch, sand, paint, repeat. Haul garbage bags to the curb, replace fixtures, scrub floors until the smell of her occupation faded into bleach and fresh paint. By early May, the house looked like itself again. Not perfect. Some scars ran too deep for amateur repair, but livable. Mine. During that time, we also filed the probate paperwork. Celeste brought Ralph's death certificate and their marriage certificate to the bank, to the DMV, to the insurance company. Documentation of what everyone already knew. She was his widow, entitled to what little he'd left behind. The bank officer processed the transfer with mechanical efficiency. As the surviving spouse, you're entitled to the full account balance. I'll need the death certificate and marriage certificate, then we can process the transfer within 3 business days. $12,000. Ralph's entire savings, accumulated over years of careful spending. Celeste cried when the transfer completed, not from joy, but from the weight of knowing Ralph had wanted her to have it, had remarried her specifically to make sure Bernice couldn't touch it. The Camry went to her too. 10 years old but reliable, worth maybe $8,500. She sold her own dying Honda and kept Ralph's car, drove it to work every day like a memorial. I thought it was over. For 2 weeks I slept in my own bed and heard nothing from Bernice. The house settled around me. I cooked dinner in my kitchen, watched television on my couch, lived my life. Then the letter came, certified mail. I signed for it on a Tuesday morning in mid-May. Recognized the legal letterhead format before I even opened it. Some attorney I'd never heard of. Office in a strip mall on the south side. I read it standing at the mailbox. Lawsuit, civil complaint. Bernice Thompson versus Merle Robertson. The claims made me read twice to be sure I understood. Common law, marriage to Ralph. Wrongful eviction causing emotional distress. Damages sought, $25,000. My hands tightened on the paper. Common law marriage? Arizona abolished that in 1913. I spoke out loud to no one, just needing to hear the absurdity voiced. And wrongful eviction? She was trespassing in my house. I walked back inside and called Chen immediately. He answered on the third ring. She filed a lawsuit. I didn't bother with greetings. Claims common law marriage with Ralph before the divorce, demanding $25,000 for wrongful eviction. Silence on his end for 3 seconds. Then, send me a copy. I'll review it. It's garbage, right? Tell me this is garbage. It's a nuisance suit, completely baseless. Papers rustled on his end. But we still have to respond formally and appear in court. She's betting you'll settle rather than spend more on legal fees. I'm not settling. I know, but this will cost another $4,000 in legal fees to defend properly and file counterclaims. I close my eyes, counted to 5, open them. Do it, whatever it takes. I want her crushed this time, legally, financially, completely. Understood. I'll draft a response and file it by Friday. I hung up and stood in my kitchen, looking at the lawsuit papers spread on the table. Bernice wanted one more round. Fine. This time I'd make sure she understood what final meant. Chen agreed to meet the next morning. I spent that evening reviewing everything. Timeline of events written out in chronological order. Documents arranged in folders, phone records printed, photographs of damage organized by room. My firefighter training coming back. Assess the situation, gather your resources, plan your attack. His office was downtown, 12th floor, windows overlooking Phoenix Sprawl. I parked in the garage beneath the building, rode the elevator up, walked into reception at 9 sharp. Chen looked tired but focused. He spread documents across his conference table like a general planning a campaign. Her case is garbage. Common law marriage doesn't exist in Arizona, but we don't just defend, we attack. He tapped a folder. I'll call 3 neighbors who saw Nelson's truck in your driveway for months. I'll show phone records of her threats. When we're done, the judge will sanction her attorney for filing this waste of time. How long? Hearings in 3 weeks, June 16th. We'll be ready. Those 3 weeks passed in preparation. Chen worked fast, filed our response within a week, subpoenaed phone records and bank statements. He interviewed neighbors. Mrs. Rodriguez next door remembered Nelson's truck clearly, the oil stains it left on my driveway in January and February. By the end of May, our case file was 3 inches thick. Every claim Bernice made, we had documentation proving it false. The hearing was set for June 16th. I marked the date, counted down. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. 20 seats, half empty. Wood paneling, fluorescent lights, that particular smell of old carpet and recycled air. Judge Wilson presided, a man in his 60s with no patience for nonsense written clearly in his expression. Bernice arrived with her attorney, Michael Driscoll, who looked like he ran ads on bus benches, cheap suit, briefcase with a broken latch. He avoided eye contact with Chen. Bernice didn't look at me. She wore a conservative dress, hair styled carefully, playing a part. The wronged woman. The victim. The judge entered. We rose. Be seated, Mr. Driscoll, present your case. Bernice took the stand first. Her attorney walked her through a rehearsed story, and she delivered it with trembling voice and strategic tears. Ralph loved me. She dabbed at her eyes with tissue. We were building a life together. His father turned him against me, and then when Ralph died, he stole everything that should have been mine. She talked about 3 years together, about promises Ralph supposedly made, about how the eviction had traumatized her, left her homeless and jobless. I watched Chen take notes, expression neutral. When Driscoll finished, Chen stood. Ms. Bernice, this is a certified copy of your divorce from Ralph Robertson, finalized February 3rd. He approached, placed the document in front of her. I watched color drain from her face. Ralph died April 2nd. Can you explain how you had a common law marriage with someone you were legally divorced from? That divorce, she stammered, looked to her attorney. It wasn't real. Ralph didn't mean it. We were still together. Then explain why Ralph remarried his first wife, Celeste, on March 8th. He laid down the marriage certificate, official seal, both signatures. Here's their marriage certificate. Were you aware your husband married someone else while you claim you were still in a relationship with him? Bernice's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Let me help you with the timeline. Chen's voice stayed level, almost gentle. Ralph divorced you February 3rd. He remarried Celeste March 8th. He died April 2nd. During the month between his remarriage and death, where were you? You were living with Nelson Hayes, who was arrested on April 4th for outstanding child support debt. Multiple witnesses saw his vehicle at the property. Would you like me to call them? Objection! Driscoll stood. This is harassment of my client. Overruled. Judge Wilson leaned forward. Answer the question, Ms. Bernice. I can't. Chen turned to the judge. Your Honor, I have 3 neighbors prepared to testify that Ms. Bernice and Mr. Hayes were cohabiting at a separate address during the time she claims she had a relationship with the deceased. I have phone records showing threatening calls from Ms. Bernice to my client. I have photographic evidence of intentional property damage totaling over $3,000. This lawsuit is not only baseless, it's fraudulent. He paused, then added, I move for immediate dismissal and request sanctions. Judge Wilson studied the documents Chen had submitted, read for 2 full minutes in silence. Then he looked up. I've heard enough. This lawsuit is frivolous and borders on fraud. Case dismissed with prejudice. His gavel came down once. Ms. Bernice, you are ordered to pay Mr. Robertson's legal fees totaling $6,200 within 90 days. Your attorney should have advised you better before wasting this court's time. Bernice made a sound, not quite a sob. Driscoll gathered his papers rapidly, wouldn't meet Chen's eyes. Thank you, Your Honor. Chen's voice held quiet satisfaction. We stood. The judge exited. Bernice stumbled from the courtroom, her attorney trailing behind her, offering useless words. Outside, on the courthouse steps, bright June sun beating down, Chen shook my hand. That's the end of it. She can't refile. Dismissed with prejudice means it's permanent. Celeste, who'd watched from the gallery, joined us. She'll never pay that $6,000. She doesn't have it. Chen nodded. Probably not, but you could garnish wages, file liens, make her life complicated. He walked to his car. Celeste and I stood in the heat, watching downtown Phoenix traffic flow past. She was right. Bernice wouldn't pay. Couldn't pay. Which meant I had one more move to make. The court said she owed me $6,200. But court orders meant nothing if she had nothing to take. I sat at my kitchen table that evening after the hearing, legal documents spread before me. The judgment was official, stamped, enforceable. But Bernice didn't have $62, let alone $6,000. She'd lost her house, her boyfriend, any leverage she'd ever possessed. Still, she had to work somewhere, had to eat, had to live. I needed to know where, what she had. I reached for my phone and dialed Webb's number. He answered on the second ring. Merle, congratulations on the court win, Chen told me. I need another job from you. What kind? Employment verification, assets, bank accounts if you can find them, whatever you can dig up on Bernice Thompson. Looking to collect on that judgment? Among other things. Webb was silent for 3 seconds. 800, same as before. Done. How soon? Give me 3 days. He called back in 2. I met him at the same diner off Indian School Road, same booth by the window. He slid a folder across the table. Your girl's got a side hustle that's about to catch up with her. I opened it. Employment records, bank statements. Something that looked like internal accounting spreadsheets with yellow highlighting. She works at Southwest Auto Sales, receptionist, administrative work. Webb tapped the highlighted figures. But she was skimming from the cash drawer. Small amounts, $200 to $300 at a time. The dealership system shows Ralph Robertson made multiple cash deposits to cover shortfalls in her drawer. He's dead, deposits stopped, but her account shows she's still $2,400 in the hole. I studied the numbers. Dates going back 6 months. Cash shortages matching exactly to Ralph's compensating deposits, down to the penny. They don't know about it yet? It's in the system, but nobody's audited her account since he died. Ralph covered for her, probably didn't want her fired, didn't want the embarrassment. Webb leaned back. One audit request from the right person, and she's done. Who would be the right person? Corporate office? District manager? Anyone with oversight authority who asks the right questions. I closed the folder, slid $800 in cash across the table. Thanks, Marcus. I was never here. The audit letter took me 2 evenings to write. Had to sound official, but untraceable. Professional concern from an anonymous employee worried about financial irregularities. I included copies of the highlighted spreadsheets Webb had provided, account numbers, dates, amounts. Mailed it on a Thursday to the dealership's corporate headquarters in Scottsdale. By the following Wednesday, Webb confirmed she'd been terminated. Security walked her out mid-shift, took her keys, her access badge. Standard procedure for theft, even delayed theft. Then I called Chen. I want to garnish her wages for the court judgment. What do I need to do? She's employed. He sounded surprised. Just lost her job. But I want the process started anyway. Bank accounts, whatever she has. File a writ of garnishment with the court. If approved, we can seize bank accounts, garnish future wages, place liens. Papers rustled. Given she ignored the 90-day payment deadline, you're within your rights. It'll cost about $300 in filing fees. Do it. The garnishment paperwork took another week to process through the court. I paid the fees, signed the forms, waited. By mid-July, the marshal had served the bank. Her account was frozen. Webb's contacts told me she had $340 in it, not even enough to cover the filing fees I'd paid. But it wasn't about the money anymore. 2 days later, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered anyway. You destroyed me. Bernice's voice, barely recognizable, hollow. You took my home, my job, everything. What more do you want? I stood at my kitchen window, looking out at the street where this had all started. I wanted you to understand that actions have consequences. You got that lesson now? I have nothing left. Nothing. You still have your life, your health. That's more than a lot of people get. I kept my voice level. Ralph gave you chances. You threw them away. I'm just finishing what you started. She hung up without another word. 3 weeks later, Webb sent me a final report. Bernice had left Phoenix entirely, moved to Nevada, her mother's house in Henderson, filed for bankruptcy, credit score destroyed by judgments and collections. I stood in my driveway that evening, reading the report in the fading August light. Across the street, Mrs. Rodriguez watered her garden. 2 houses down, kids played basketball. Normal neighborhood sounds, normal evening. She was gone. Not just from my house, but from my city, my state. The fight was over. I folded the report, walked up my porch steps, pulled out my key, the new key, the third set of locks, the ones only I had, and went inside. My home, my walls, my victory. August arrived with monsoon rains and temperatures that baked Phoenix streets into submission. 7 months had passed since I'd stood in that cemetery watching them lower Ralph into Arizona dirt. I carried my coffee to the front porch, same as I did most evenings now. The chair I'd bought to replace the one Bernice had broken sat perfectly positioned to watch the sunset paint the mountains west of the city. The house was mine again, completely, legally, permanently mine. I'd spent close to $23,000 making that true. Attorney fees, investigator fees, court costs, repairs, hotel bills, while I waited for justice to grind through its gears. $23,000 to keep what had always been mine, to honor what Ralph had tried to fix before he died. But the house was worth $420,000, and more than that, it was home. The place I'd lived for 11 years, my neighborhood, my porch, my view of these mountains. Some things you didn't put a price on. Celeste had received everything the law said was hers. $12,000 from Ralph's bank account. The Camry, which she'd sold for $8,500 and used to pay off Ralph's remaining credit card debt. $4,200 he'd owed, now settled. Thank you for fighting for what was right. She'd told me that last week, sitting in this same chair, drinking lemonade instead of coffee. I paid off Ralph's credit cards with the money from selling his car. At least that's settled now. You were his legal wife, I'd said. You deserved everything the law gave you. Bernice was just a mistake he tried to fix before the end. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Text message. Deputy Morrison, one of the sheriff's deputies who'd executed the eviction. Thought you'd want to know? Subject Bernice filed Chapter 7 bankruptcy in Nevada last week. Subject Nelson Hayes still serving time in Pima County. Release date November. It's over, Merle. I read it twice, then set the phone on the small table beside my chair. Over. 7 months of fighting. 7 months of lawyers and courts and strategies and sleepless nights, calculating my next move. And now it was over. Not with triumph, not with celebration. Just over. A car pulled into my driveway. Emma, my granddaughter, 22 and finishing nursing school. She'd avoided the house during the fight, couldn't handle the ugliness of watching her grandfather battle her father's ex-wife while still grieving her father's death. I understood. I didn't blame her, but she was here now. I stood as she climbed out of her car, walked up the driveway with a tentative smile. "Grandpa, the house looks amazing. I'm sorry I didn't visit more when Dad was sick. Can I come by more often now? This is your home too, sweetheart. Always has been." She hugged me. Went inside to look at the repairs, the restored rooms, the evidence that life continued after loss. I remained on the porch, coffee cooling in my hands. Ralph had made mistakes, married the wrong woman, trusted someone who only wanted what he could provide, let his grief after Celeste cloud his judgment. We all make mistakes. But he'd tried to fix them at the end. Remarried the woman who'd actually loved him, made sure Bernice couldn't steal what belonged to his family. I'd made sure his wishes were honored. That's all a father can do. The sun dropped below the horizon. Phoenix lights began to glow across the valley. Thousands of them, millions, spreading out in every direction. This city, this massive desert metropolis, had been my home for 30 years, before Ralph was born. Before I'd become a father, a firefighter, a homeowner. It would be my home until I died. Bernice had learned what Ralph knew at the end. You can't build a life on someone else's foundation. You can't take what isn't yours and expect to keep it. Some lessons cost everything to learn. Emma emerged from inside, sat beside me. We didn't talk much, just watched darkness settle over the neighborhood. Mrs. Rodriguez finished her gardening and waved goodnight. The basketball game down the street ended. Kids called inside for dinner. Normal. Ordinary. Home. Eventually, Emma left, promising to visit next weekend. I remained alone on the porch, breathing deep, feeling the weight of 7 months finally lift from my shoulders. I wasn't happy exactly. Too much had been lost for happiness. Ralph was still dead. That hole in my life would never fill. But I felt something close to peace, the kind that comes from knowing you did what needed doing, fought when you had to fight, protected what deserved protection. The coffee mug was empty now, just residual warmth against my palms. Cricket sounds rose from the desert landscaping. Distant traffic hummed on the interstate. I stood, stretched slightly. 63-year-old body, firefighter's joints that ached in the mornings, but functional. Strong enough. I picked up the mug, took one last look at my street, my neighborhood, my life. Then I turned toward my front door, my lock, my key. I went inside, locked the door behind me, and turned off the porch light. Morning would come early, same as always, and I'd be here to meet it. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.